And like I said, there is a great interview on the Dr. Green Thumb Show starring your boy Alonzo Williams. He just did it a few days ago. And this all kind of started when Disco Daddy, KRS-One, King T, and probably leaving somebody out. But they were on they had an interview a couple of weeks back, and they were telling the story of West Coast hip hop. And I put story in quotes. You know, there were a few things that Lonzo cleared up last Tuesday. And if you haven't checked that show out, I would definitely highly suggest that for, just hip hop purposes, especially West Coast hip hop purposes. But let's go all the way back, because there was a few things in the interview, Lonzo, that I found very interesting that we haven't talked about in a very long time. We never did talk about. You still surprise me to this day, man. I've known you for damn near 8 years or whatever, and I'm still hearing new stories. But let's go all the way back, man. You talked about in that interview with B Real from Cypress Hill, you talked about the life and death of disco. Can you take us back, give us just a history lesson? When did disco start? Maybe some of the bigger hits at the beginning, and how did it come to an end?
Man, disco hit in the late 70s. I was still in high school, dude. I just got out of high school. Disco was coming around, but it was really peaked in like 76, 77, 78. And it was Donna Summers, Bee Gees, KC and the Sunshine Band. Who else? The TK, it was a label out of Florida called TK. Everything they did was disco. Okay. You had groups like Foxy, Get Off. I mean, it was just a whole different sound that was just unique, man. It was all energetic. It was all pumping. It was always cranking, and they just created the phenomenon of disco, and everybody was into it, dude. Everybody was into it. Black folks. We had the first club I ever played at on a regular basis was a little small ass club on Main Street in LA on 108th and Main called the Watts Disco. Okay. They only had a beer and wine license, and I just got my broadcast license. I ain't had but a handful of records. And the homeboy, the owner, he was supposed to be the DJ, but sometimes once he realized I could play, he let me play all night. And that's where I started getting my skills at, man. That's where I started getting my skills at. That's no shit.
Disco Lonzo. And tell us about the end when, maybe let's even go back to the climax when it was popping. Tell us about that time, and then tell us how it just made a drastic downfall.
Well, probably one of the biggest faults of disco, it got associated with the gay lifestyle, especially from New York. A lot of clubs in New York, a lot of gay clubs really frequent disco. You had this cat named Sylvester. He was an androgynous cat. You couldn't tell what to do with a man or woman, but he could sing his ass off. He looked like Luther Vandross a little bit, but he was a real smooth faced dude. But the homeboy be rocking, and people would just get in their feelings because they dancing to this what could be gay dudes music. It was just really stupid. But he had a song called "Make Me Feel Mighty Real," and it just was a badass song, man. It was up tempo, and he had this real high falsetto, and it just was a interesting time. But like I said before, because it was so synonymous with the gay lifestyle, it turned a lot of people off. Although there was a lot of clubs that was not gay clubs that played disco, but that became the overall tone. That's that F music. That's that F music. And then you had another problem because even in the straight clubs, brothers was doing that disco, that real shit. Got white girls flying around the room. You ain't got to dance, just stand there. Brother gonna make you work. Meanwhile, her old man sit on the sideline with a beer in his hand. He can't do none of that shit. And it was like disco was a very what I want to say. One of those genres that brought people together. It brought people together. It was like a melting pot. But again, some people didn't like the fact that it was a melting pot. It was people migrated together and partied together. It was one, and then you bring in the drug factor. Don't forget about the drug factor. The drug of that era was cocaine. and everybody, they, I think I told you this before, the way they talked about cocaine on the news made you want to go get you a shot. I ain't bullshitting. Jerry Dunphy was, I remember this like it was yesterday, man. Jerry Dunphy was talking about cocaine like it was the saving of Jesus, the new coming of Jesus. Cocaine, the drug of the 80s. It's taking over the clubs. It's taking over the party scene. The champagne, it's a champagne high. And it made like, damn, I want to get me some of that shit. And they showed you what it looked like. It showed you people having a good time. And that shit became synonymous with the party lifestyle. Okay, especially more so disco. And after a while, people started realizing that it had a negative effect. Because you could party all night on cocaine. I don't know how you could do that. I don't really know about how you do that. But they say you can party all night on cocaine. I don't know, but that's what they say. Okay. But then you had the negative effects. You had the negative side effects that, you don't want to do nothing. Then you want to, spending your money, and it just man, it just was not the thing to do. It started off being the thing to do, but then you quickly, if you had any kind of sense, you knew it wasn't the thing to do. And then one day, because rock and roll was getting kicked in the ass. One day, this Chicago DJ, I think he went to a Detroit game.
Steve Daw. It was called the Disco Demolition. The night disco died, July 12th, 1979, Comiskey Park, Chicago, Illinois.
Thank you very much. And homeboy just burnt up a bunch of disco records and created this phrase, disco sucks. And that shit died. You couldn't get an R&B or if it was dance R&B, yes. That's how Wild Cherry and Average White Band, they got played in the discos a lot because it was up tempo R&B, and it was dance music. But rock and roll, shit. And then you got cats like Rolling Stones. They trying to do disco. Everybody had to do a disco cut, and some people wasn't checking for that shit. All the big boys, you had to do a disco. Motown doing disco. Philly International doing disco. Everybody's doing some disco cuts, trying to appease to the disco crowd. And all of a sudden, just like that, disco sucks. And disco was no more. And then they tried to say the same thing about hip hop. Oh, they ain't gonna last. And I used the analogy that I came up with a while ago. I was in the studio kicking it. And I said, imagine a little kid born to a single mom.
Thank you, Rock Fresh. Make sure you guys check out the Pack and Ganja show on Super Audio Network. Appreciate you, man.
Much love, Rock Fresh. Imagine a single mom having a kid. Ladies, she's not wealthy at all. She has a kid, and the kid, they tell you the kid ain't gonna make it. The kid ain't gonna make it. The kid ain't gonna make it. And nobody pays this kid no attention. And one day he gets out the hospital, and the mom dies. And next thing you know, this kid is big and taking over the world, and nobody wants to pay him no attention because they think the kid ain't gonna be around no time. Well, that was disco and hip hop. Hip hop was born through disco. Sugar Hill Gang, perfect example. Sugar Hill disco gave birth to the